Today's Metropolitan Club Forum, Product, Profit, and Purpose, is sponsored by the Columbus Foundation. Please join me in thanking them. Thanks, Doug. Information about each of our speakers is in your forum flyer, so I'll only provide a brief introduction. Our first speaker is the founder and CEO of Design Outreach. Please welcome Greg Bixler. Our next speaker is the co-founder and CEO of the Tony R. Wells Foundation. Please welcome Tony Wells. Serving as our host today is the President and General Counsel of the Economic and Community Development Institute, or ECDI. Please welcome Steve Fireman. And with that, Steve, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. One more spontaneous applause, please, everybody. The reason I asked for that is last time I had the privilege to be up here, I somehow elicited a spontaneous applause. I have no idea why, and it's not likely to happen again, so I appreciate you doing that for me. We're here to talk about social entrepreneurship and social enterprise. And I'm going to first talk a little bit about kind of an academic definition of what social entrepreneurship is, and then we're going to talk to these gentlemen who are living proof and living examples of what a social entrepreneur is and their companies do. A social entrepreneurship is about applying practical, innovative, sustainable approaches to benefit society in general with an emphasis on those who are marginalized. It's a term that captures a unique approach to economic and social problems, and it's an approach that cuts across all sectors and disciplines, grounded in certain values and processes that are common to each social entrepreneur, independent of whether his or her area has been education, health, welfare reform, agriculture, no matter how the organization is set up, whether it's a nonprofit, a for-profit, a foundation, doesn't really matter. So I think today you're going to hear about a great variety of social entrepreneurship enterprises. And first I'd like to start with you, Tony, and why don't you tell us a little bit about the Wells Foundation?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My wife and I, we created the Wells Foundation in 2001 after we sold our training and education company. And so it's now our 13th year that I have the pleasure of getting up every morning and going out into the community and working with hardworking nonprofits who are dedicated and providing valuable services to the community. And when we thought about creating our foundation, we thought, what do we really bring into the table? And so our backgrounds were technology, entrepreneurship. And so when we started the foundation, we thought there's not many foundations out there focusing on teaching social entrepreneurship or implementing information technology as a piece of their strategy, enabling them to serve more people and become more efficient with operations. So that's where we really focus. So every day, I get to go home and tell my 12-year-old and my 23-year-old, the amazing work that goes on in the community and the contributions that we're trying to make.
Great. And they listen to you and they understand?
Well, the 23-year-old moved out, so I think she got tired of hearing it, so.
Pretty cool. Greg, tell us a little about Design Outreach.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me here, too. Design Outreach, we're creating life-sustaining solutions for people in developing countries. This started about 5 years ago. My co-founder and I, we are both engineers. We both came through to an experience where we realized that the world needs better and appropriate technology in order to provide their everyday needs, so water, food, shelter, whatever that might be. It's been a really exciting opportunity. We've had lots of contributed services coming together. Just looking and seeing the great impact that, like our water pump, the Life Pump, is going to bring to people. We're really excited to see that going out into the world and tackling and developing this sort of expertise in humanitarian engineering to tackle new problems that can help potentially millions of people out there.
Fascinating. Tony, what is the reach of the foundation? Your investments?
Our investments, I mean, in terms of the type of organizations we work with?
And geographically, is it all over the country?
I'd say most of it historically has been in the Central Ohio area, but over the last 4 years, as we've developed a relationship with Ohio State, and we've worked with a wide variety of students. Last year, we had just over 1,500 students that were involved with something related to social entrepreneurship that our foundation provided some funding to, not necessarily the total funding, but in collaboration with other folks like the Columbus Foundation. And so our reach is getting broader and broader as we start to realize that part of our focus as a foundation is to lift up the next generation of business leaders, social leaders in our community. And many of those folks are coming from around the world. And so we can be very myopic and say, from a foundation standpoint, we're only interested in local social impact. But if we truly are vested in the idea of grooming up the next generation of leaders, then we have to be open to considering doing work outside the country. So over the last couple years, I have been in the favelas of Brazil. That's the slums of Brazil. I have built, if you've ever seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire, I have spent the entire afternoon visiting with families in Mumbai, in the same slums that the movie was filmed. I've been in China. So the last couple years, I've spent a lot of time going to other regions of the world, trying to understand how social entrepreneurship could affect those regions, and also trying to learn from them and what we can bring back and apply here in our own community.
Right.
So.
ECDI actually started very locally, and we've grown to become a statewide organization, making investments in businesses all over the state. So it's kind of a natural thing to grow and increase your geography. I don't think we'll be in Mumbai ever, but we do we do our work here, and you know, we're really proud of what we do. ECDI was founded in 2004. We're an organization that helps people become sustainable. We do it through a strategy of business creation. We help train and provide technical assistance and consulting for startups as well as expansion businesses. And we also have a lot of different funding strategies, which means both grants and loans. And what sets us apart, we think, and we're quite sure leads to the success of a lot of our clients, is that we continually provide technical assistance and consulting and resources throughout the life of our clients' loans or grants, whatever the case might be. Greg, I was wondering, how do you find yourself here? How did you get involved in this crazy world of social enterprise, and why aren't you just out there trying to make a whole lot of money for yourself?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it's something that you really have to look deep into and understand why to do this. It really started for me. I graduated from Ohio State University. I started working at Battelle. I was there for about 3 years or so as a product designer, machine design engineer. And I went on this short-term missions trip to a country in Central Asia called Kyrgyzstan. It had nothing to do with engineering, the trip's objective. But when I was there, I realized, and oh, by the way, I should mention, this was my first out-of-country experience besides Canada at that point. And Canada doesn't really count, as you know, if you've traveled otherwise. And it was a huge culture shock, number one. But number two, I realized that there's people who don't have, you know, the basic needs. I saw people that were very creative, though. So the locals, the indigenous people, they were using the supplies and materials they needed, and they were very ingenious designs. So I remember thinking, you would never see this in the United States, but it works here. And one image that just sticks in my mind from 2006 is this old car that they stuck up on the side of the road, and it was acting as a retaining wall. And of course, you'd never see that here. You know, that wouldn't be to code or whatever. But there, they needed a retaining wall. They couldn't afford blocks. They used a car body and turned it into a wall. And I thought, wouldn't it be so neat if a powerhouse think tank like Battelle type of people could get behind these local people in a place like Kyrgyzstan and sort of co-design, so work together to develop solutions and make it a social enterprise for both them and for ourselves, where it would be, you know, we wouldn't be donating people out of poverty, which almost never works.
Fascinating. How about you? How did you get into this?
Well, you know, again, part of our story is that, you know, we started our own businesses. We were very fortunate to grow those businesses. And when we decided to sell, you know, it really was a year from the time that we decided to sell to the time that we actually sold the company. And so that gave us an entire year for soul searching. You know, what are we going to do with the second half of our life? If we actually sold the company and we actually didn't have our house mortgaged, you know, for the company, and we didn't have credit card debt and all these things to keep the company running, what would we do? And you know, we decided, you know, we would analyze our lives and what was the things that was most important to us and things that we felt like we could make an impact. And so, you know, we started analyzing it, and one of the things that I always reflect on is being on the Goodwill board for 20 years and the amazing people that I met as part of that journey. And so another large influence would be great nonprofit leaders, someone like Jeff Dameron from Akitigan, who every time you meet with him, he's just so exciting. And he's so committed and inspired about his organization, you just want to work hard for him. So as part of my journey of owning my own company, I met not only some great nonprofit leaders that are doing some amazing work that I can't do. You know, Jeff can sit bedside with a family of a dying child that I can't do. And so what can I do to support that person in making that mission successful? But also, when I was serving on the Goodwill Board, I think the definition of true leadership was defined for me. And it wasn't that people were being recognized as the person who started a company and became wealthy, but it's what their contributions were to Columbus. And I think Doug talks about this a lot in terms of our future leadership, is, you know, what are we doing to build a better community? And I got to see individuals who were 20 years my senior, who were CEOs of major corporations, a Jack Partridge, who continued to show up to every single meeting, make a contribution, and it was well above and beyond his job. And I said, that's what true leadership is. That's what I want to evolve into. And so that was really, as we started thinking about our second half of the life and what we were going to do with this blessing of this financial means that we now have, we thought we'd start the Family Foundation, again, focusing on social entrepreneurship and information technology. But it was really about what is our legacy? I didn't want our legacy as a family to be solely that we started a company and gave our kids to go, our ability for our kids to go to a nicer school, but what are we going to do to lift up the nonprofits in our community and the next generation to become better leaders? So.
Greg, what makes you define your organization as a social enterprise as opposed to a nonprofit or just a corporation doing good work?
Sure, really the social impact is significant. Looking at what are the real needs and wants in the world. When we first started the current project, we approached an organization operating in the Central African Republic. And this organization had been there for a dozen years or so, working through community development efforts. The first thing they do is go in and put in a water source, and then they build latrines, and they build education around sanitation and things like that. We went to them and said, what's your number one problem? If you could have this problem solved, and oh, by the way, these NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, they typically lack the technical expertise that is needed to come up with innovative solutions. So we went to them and said, we have this team of engineers, and by this time we had people from Johnson & Johnson and Battelle and a whole variety of coalition partners that were behind us and said, we want to do something together. And right away they told us about this water pump. They said, this pump, we love it, it's lasted for a long time, but we don't have replacement parts for it anymore, and they don't make them anymore. And so we looked at it and said, surely there's got to be replacement parts. And well, we couldn't find any. And we said, surely there's got to be another pump out there that would work better. And we couldn't find any. So we had to ask ourselves, were we going to redesign this thing and start from scratch or walk away? And so essentially it's been a very amazing angle to watch all these volunteers come together, people who are experts in their fields. We've been able to bring this coalition of subject matter experts together and be able to solve the problems. And we're tackling more problems beyond the water pump. But being a social enterprise, our whole idea is, let's take this, let's spin it off, let's make a separate entity that is able to be for profit. So in other words, it's able to feed the nonprofit design outreach, which is this mechanism to solve problems and create successful products, which we then can use to fuel more future innovation. So the question is, why make it a for-profit model, whether it's L3C or LLC? And really that's to make it sustainable. So we want it to be market-driven. We want it to be, it has to be, such that the NGOs out there, the World Visions of the world who we're working with now, they have to be able to afford to buy this so that we're not raising money to subsidize something that's going to the field, which when our donors go away, they're not able to buy the parts anymore. So we want to make sure it's sustainable for 25, 30, 40, 50 years into the future, and not just based on our donor support. And so that's really important to us to have a social enterprise model where these spare parts and future pumps and whatever other products, whatever other solution we tackle next is available in the future.
Right. No, I agree with that point. The sustainability is critical. My partner and I, Ina Kinney, every line of business we start at ECDI, we do it with an eye toward sustainability and earned revenue, and how are we going to make that happen? And those are the questions we have to always ask ourselves. How's it going to support the larger organization and the mission?
And Steve, I would add one more thing to that, and that is that in addition to sustainability, how are we going to make it scalable, and how are we going to replicate it? And I think a lot of nonprofits who start social enterprises think about, okay, we're in Franklin County, and we're going to start this social enterprise, and it's good for us, and it's good for the residents, and we can make money at it. But sometimes they don't think big enough about, even though we don't have plans to grow beyond Franklin County, if that's such a great idea of creating social impact, why wouldn't we let a nonprofit in another county take that idea and run with it? So we like the idea of social enterprises that are actually replicatable across many nonprofit organizations, because if the real value is about the social impact, then why should you hoard the idea and just keep it local?
No, we agree, exactly. That's exactly why we've taken ECDI statewide, and we maybe even beyond in the future, who knows, but scalability is critical. What do you look at? You won't, so generally you're not going to invest in any old nonprofit, and we've talked a little bit about it, but what's your screening mechanisms, or what are you really looking for?
Well, I'd like to say that, I'll just publicly say that our screening process is much easier than the Columbus Foundation and probably even ECDI.
Well, wait, I can debate that because I have a substantial investment from the Columbus Foundation, but not from the Wells Foundation.
Yeah, but do you get to make your decisions over a glass of wine with your wife?
No,
So
not your wife.
Yeah. So I'll say that we have a structured process, but it's probably less formal because we really look at what the opportunities are. And again, it's not just nonprofits. We're also looking for first-generation social entrepreneurs that we can invest in. So two of the people who are with us today are two 24-year-olds that our foundation is investing $175,000 into, because they have a vision of generating millions of dollars in charitable donations through the millennials. And they're going to do this through a company called Heroes to You, which connects the millennial generations with their favorite celebrity. And it levels the playing field. It gives them the ability to meet their favorite celebrity for $5, because millennials today don't get to participate in the $2,500 golf outing, but they are just as committed to the vision of this community and to service and trying to lift up nonprofits and help them be successful. So that's an example of we're investing in the next generation of great ideas that create social value and engage an entire community and generation into community giving. At the same time, we work with organizations like the Down Syndrome Association, and we're looking at an opportunity for them. We looked at the total cost, we looked at the scalability, we looked at their ability to execute, and what we did is we started to separate those and say, how can we help them be successful? For many nonprofits, they have ingenious ideas. Nonprofits are just natural problem solvers. You can go anywhere. They're the most frugal people that you ever met, and they're just natural problem solvers, but would they necessarily have the ability to take that idea and commercialize it, make money at it, and to scale it? And so we have a project right now where the Down Syndrome Association, who only has a couple paid staff, we actually took their great idea, moved it into a separate company that is co-owned by both the foundation and the organization, and also through Groundwork Group. And collectively, the three of us as owners in the company are taking their great idea and scaling across the country. So it's a filtering process. We can look at it from a financial, we can look at it from return, but we really have to be quite creative to try to figure out what fits for that individual organization. There's no single filtering process that you can just apply to every opportunity.
Okay. Well, you still didn't totally answer my question about ECDI, because you can get a return,
No,
you can get, no, I'm
that's
just
called deflection.
I'm just kidding. Social enterprise doesn't always have to be the cool, new, bright, shiny idea either. What we do at ECDI is we lend to people who are underbanked or unbanked, and we do it with partners like the Columbus Foundation, who have faith in us and invest in us because they want to help solve the job crisis in Central Ohio. So the Columbus Foundation invested in ECDI, and we invest their money and leverage it with a lot of our other loan funds to create small businesses and jobs. And it doesn't sound that sexy. And the social enterprise part of it is, the sustainability part is, obviously we're lending money and we make money on the money we lend, and then we revolve it and lend it again and again and again. Hopefully, right, Doug? Hopefully.
Yeah.
So.
But I think it's important to talk about, provide examples of that scalability. So please allow me to reference this project we are doing with the Down Syndrome Association and with Groundwork Group. They do an annual fundraising event called Buddy Walk. They hold at the Crew Stadium. Everybody shows up, it's an all-day party, you take your child with Down syndrome and you walk around Crew Stadium. 4 years ago, they were raising $100,000. They then hired Groundwork Group to build them a new fundraising application, and last year they raised $375,000. So we said, well, if there are 250 cities across the country that do a buddy walk event, wouldn't it be cool if we took the Groundwork Group solution and made it available to all 250 locations? So we are now investing $200,000 to work with Groundwork Group, to work with the Down Syndrome Association, and we believe that we can move the needle on their national fundraising results from $11 million to $40 million in the next 5 years for a $200,000 investment. I believe that that's the way philanthropy needs to talk and to be thinking. It's about leveraging. It's not just about grant making, but it's turning $200,000 into tens of millions of dollars.
That's awesome.
And those are both great points for design outreach. I'm glad you brought those up, the leverage and the scalability. The way we select projects, it has to be a big impact. So not that the niche product and the niche problem is not important. We're looking at big impact problems that can be scaled and working through vehicles that can scale them. So for instance, our work with World Vision, we're starting in Malawi in a pilot test program that we're in the middle of. And the opportunity is to go to the whole network, which is 100 countries just within their network, which then goes to all these other countries that are watching and looking and seeing what's going on and are interested in the new solutions that are being introduced. And truly, that's one opportunity or one option of scaling, something that we might be able to produce. The leveraging is also something we're really excited about, what we do. The majority of R&D, so research and development in any sector, the majority of the cost is in the personnel. There's people, that their charge-out rate could be for an entry-level engineer at a major corporation between $100 to $200 all the way to $300, $400, $500 per hour. So for every hour they work on a project, it would charge that much. And we all know that it takes an hour just to kind of warm up to something, and it could take weeks and weeks and weeks to really produce anything beyond a report. If you wanted to produce something that was tangible, that you could feel and touch, let alone commercialize a product, something that you would scale to a mass market, just takes millions of dollars in investment. We've been able to do that for almost literally a fraction of the cost because of the tremendous workforce that gives their in-kind service. And the donors, of course, you need gas in the tank. You need a little bit of money to be able to get that car going. Somebody gives you a car, you still need to be able to drive it. And so we have donors that come alongside and say, hey, I'll give you some contributed cash because I know it's going to be leveraged 5 or 10 times what it would be otherwise. So we're really excited about that. And that's something that we're working with partners. Like our coalition of partners include academics, industry, other nonprofits, and donors, of course. And in the industry, we have a partner in CPEX outside of Ohio here, who are extremely excited about what we're doing. They've been integral component supplier. We've really been able to bring together experts in all the different areas that we need, and not just people, but the entire organization who comes alongside and says, hey, we're going to get ourselves behind this, and by the way, it's a win-win. So we're not just doing it philanthropically, which is great, and that's nice. We're doing it from a business sense where, for CPEX, for instance, they're looking at entering emerging markets. So even if they never make a huge profit on the part that they're selling for the hand pump, they're looking at getting into emerging markets and helping spread their name worldwide into, for instance, developing countries. So it's really, we look at leveraging, how is it a win-win for not only the donor, but the volunteer, but the organization, the companies that might be sponsoring us.
Yeah, one common theme that I'm hearing here is that we're all seeing a lot of opportunity and a lot of growth, and we all have to make choices. How do we prevent our organizations from chasing that next bright, shiny object, as they say? And it's a good problem to have. It's a problem that Ian and I deal with pretty much daily, where it seems like you can't take another step without opportunity knocking on the door. How do you deal with that, Tony?
Well, it's easy. I'm not the Bill Gates Foundation, so I have a lot less money, and I have a restriction on what I can invest. But I tell you what, the greatest thing about social, entrepreneurship is that you do think differently, but you never give up the rights to act like a nonprofit and beg for help. We're always out there collaborating, leveraging resources, involving other people, trying to get them caught up in the vision and the excitement of what you're doing for the community. And so when you reach those limitations, you just have become much more creative in terms of how do you get those resources for next to nothing. So,
What are your thoughts on that, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think the further along we go and the more we show that we're able to produce solutions, the more requests we continue to get. And it's really hard to deflect into requests, but we've done a really good job of saying we're going to focus on our core competencies, use our available resources to their fullest extent, but not spread ourselves so thin to where we don't get it right. Our objective is to hit the nail on the head every time. So we have to be very careful of selecting things where it's in our core competency. However, if it's not in our core competency, maybe it's say a water distribution system that is not something that a product developer, somebody who makes consumer products, has an expertise in, then we go and pull other coalition partners together and say, hey, are you interested in this opportunity to assist us? But really handing the keys over, keeping a loose or a connection between those, but allowing more partnerships to take over parts of projects that we may not have the competency for. But we really are excited about tackling many projects. We have a whole pipeline full of ideas, and it's just a matter of taking one at a time and deciphering what we can effectively do and what's out of our scope.
yeah, I think for those in the room who are thinking about a new social enterprise idea and thinking about who your potential funders or partners or investors are, there's an entire network. I'll put my foundation hat on, not my social enterprise hat on, but we're very blessed to have the Columbus Foundation here in the community, and I know the two guys I invested into got a lot of good mentorship from Dan along the way, and we very much appreciate that. But there's an entire network of private foundations, community foundations across the country who are really motivated to do more than just grant making. They want to become investors. They want to become social impact investors. And so while there's only a few of us in Columbus, we are connected to a much broader network. And so I think, again, it's the leveraging of resources and making those connection points and trying to use a broader ecosystem to be successful.
Back to you, Greg. When you can't find, you're talking about partners and building coalitions, and at ECDI, a lot of times what sometimes gets us outside of our laser focus is if we can't find the right partner to do a critical component of what we need done, be it training, technical assistance, teaching, building a food forward incubator. If it's not here, sometimes we say, what the heck, we need to do it because the city needs it or the community needs it. We're doing something similar up in Cleveland out of our Cleveland office. It's called the Cleveland Culinary Launch. It's hard to believe that there wasn't a commercial kitchen incubator in either of these two major cities, and now the cities will have them. So sometimes if you don't have the partners or no one else is stepping up, you got to kind of do it yourself, and we've found ourselves in that position several times. It's not always easy. It's not always the most economical thing to do, and sometimes your focus strays a little bit when you do that, but have you found that at all, that you've had to do?
Absolutely.
Stretch a little?
It's happened more times than not that we have a need, and we're scratching our heads asking, where's the need going to be filled? And a door just opens, and there's somebody there that's knocking on our door saying, hey, I have an interest and expertise in this area, and I want to help you. It just comes out of the blue. There's other times where we fudge it ourselves. We do it even though it's not our expertise. We get through a tough spot, and then somebody else comes along and says, oh, well, I could do a better job for you. So it kind of sparks their interest. So we continue using the resources the best that we can. One example is when we first started, we needed a website in the worst way. This is the world we're in. And so we didn't have a web designer. We couldn't hire a web designer. And so my wife actually was our web designer. And she's a school teacher, and not a web designer. And God bless her, she did a great job, and it was online.
That saved you a lot of money. Those can be quite expensive.
Very expensive. The school teacher. And she did a great job, and I think it was up for maybe 3 or 4 months or so, and a web designer came along and said, hey, I'm a web designer, and I want to help you, and has done a fantastic job. And we just continue. That doesn't happen a lot that way. A lot of times we're able to find somebody, but there's times where we don't, and we're just rushed for time, and we say we want to get something going, and we have somebody that always steps in.
Tony, you started to give a little bit of advice, so this is going to become the advice section of our program. If you had to give advice to anybody in the room, those of us who have kids or those of us who might be interested in kind of entering the field, Is there any particular background or educational background? I will interject and first say I think the best background to be a social entrepreneur is just go to law school, because you're probably not going to get a job as a lawyer. So. but what would your advice be?
Well, I think it's been proven. I mean, we're not the first ones to do social enterprise. The idea of social entrepreneurship has been around for over 25 years. There's organizations like the Acumen Fund and Ashoka who've been at this for over 20 years, and they have proven that they can take people with a wide variety of backgrounds. So I think first off, it's always the passion. I think if you look back over the history of every nonprofit that was ever started, it was always the passion in someone who was affected. They lost a child, they lost a parent, they had a cause that they wanted to try to, some pain that they wanted to eliminate. And then they surround themselves with people, just like you do in any other organization, that have the skills and the talent to help you be successful. We still today have many nonprofits in our community that have the founder syndrome, where they still driven by passion, but have never been able to get above that ceiling because they're not willing to let go of the organization and surround themselves with other people that can lift them up. And so I think anybody at any age, again, I got two 24-year-olds that just graduated that are social entrepreneurs, and we have 50-year-olds that are social entrepreneurs. It's really starting with the passion and the drive, the same passion and drive you have to be a great entrepreneur, the same tenacity, never giving up, always knocking on doors, keep knocking down those hurdles. But I think the people who you can point at that were successful is ones who recognize that none of us are perfect, and that we each have our strengths and weaknesses, but surrounding ourselves with good people, boards that can lift us up and lift the mission and and help accomplish the goals is really the key to success.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with all those things. In fact, we've gotten a lot of great advice from you, Tony. So, over the years here, I think one of the greatest things, and this is, from one of our board members who has told us this many times, shoot for the stars and land on the moon. Always think big, always want to accomplish more than you think you could possibly accomplish, and you'll be surprised. And that's what I've been surprised time after time. And we're nowhere near where we want to be in our growth curve, and we look at it and say, we have this potential of so much bigger, but it also takes it takes a lot of enthusiasm. It takes support from your family. It's important to have a healthy work-family balance as well. That's really easy, I think, to fall into, of having to put your finger in every leak, and try and give up control when you do have other people that are more talented. I continuously try to recruit people who are more talented in areas that we lack. And being able to walk away from something if it's not working, be able to admit that this isn't working, and swallow your pride and move on to the next thing. And it just takes a lot of creativity. It takes a lot of dedication, but it's amazing. I think, as Tony had mentioned, the community of people that surround you is just phenomenal. I mean, we've had, and it's not just your friends and family. It's people who hear your enthusiasm, your passion, and see your background and what you've done. And as soon as you've accomplished something, then point to that and show what your potential is, and try to get even more partners. Never stop trying to get partners, because we do need to work together.
Yeah, I think the biggest struggle that we've had over the last 13 years is, can you teach an old dog new tricks, or should you just start with the next generation? Should we take a nonprofit who's been around for 50 or 60 years with a very defined brand and try to create a new social enterprise inside their mission that makes money so they can continue to serve more people? But what comes with that is large bureaucratic decision-making, very highly structured. Or do you start with a couple young guys that's a clean slate? And we struggle with that a lot, because we've had many successes funding social enterprises, but we've also had failures. And in the case of where we had failures, it was due to the organizations could not focus on the social enterprise. It was that bright, shiny thing that says, oh, if we come up with a social enterprise, we'll finally solve the money gap. And they may go down that path for a couple months until they hear about the next grant or the next government contract, and they'll chase after that one. And so the lack of focus and lack of dedicated staff on that particular activity, or even taking before the board and say, what is our strategic goals? Is it that every year we're going to try to increase the total dollars raised through independent social enterprise to earn income opportunities, go up by 5%. And our goal within 5 years is to be at 50% grants and 50% making our own money. But if it's just that project that comes along because they think it's going to solve a short-term problem, many of them have died and we've wasted a lot of money. But we've learned from that on how to vet out the right opportunities to determine whether they have the right leadership, the right culture to embrace a multi-year sustainable model for social enterprise.
By the way, in a few minutes, we're going to stop talking and you're going to have the opportunity to ask some questions. So be thinking of those. And please let there be questions so we don't have to keep talking. So in closing, a couple closing thoughts or remarks. If we're sitting here again, which I'm sure we'll be invited back, by the way, but if we're sitting here again next year, what's your company going to look like next year or maybe the year after?
I mean, we're very excited to see where we're at. I think by the end of the year, we're going to have water wells in 2 countries serving 4,000 people, and that's going to be a wonderful success story of people that have had to walk over 2 kilometers to get water in a lot of places where the water is dirty and people are getting sick. So 4,000 people is just the tip of the iceberg for us. I think the year after that, it's going to be 10 times that or 20 times that. We're just going to continue growing, but also have in our pipeline new projects that we've started and have had success stories as well, such as we're hoping that there's a project where this water catchment feeding system in northern Malawi will be online for 50,000 people to have water, a problem that we're trying to help solve. So these are 2 years from now. You know, we're looking at having this program management staff that is able to coordinate teams of volunteers on multiple projects on multiple levels and being able to be the technical wing for multiple nonprofits who are on the field. They have the boots in the ground. They understand the needs and wants and problems of the people who are just, you know, the life is just so different. If you haven't been to a developing country, it's hard to describe. But when you're there and you understand that you can change a life by simply being innovative and having a new idea, a new social enterprise, it's very exciting. So I think we're very optimistic, and we're just growing faster than we can imagine.
Congratulations, that's really cool. How about you, Mr. Wells?
Well, if I could only project that. I mean, it's been 13 years, and every year I think I know exactly where we're going to be next year. And every year we continue to make strides in our long-term vision, but we also find so many great opportunities. I would say that, you know, our primary initiative right now is to really educate, build up the ecosystem and understanding of how nonprofits and first-time social entrepreneurs can take advantage of this wonderful opportunity where you have philanthropic patient capital who wants to do more than grant making. That really wants to create organizations, businesses, ideas that create social impact, but also make money for our nonprofit community. And so we've just created a new education program which we're launching for nonprofit CEOs this fall. So we hope that in the next year that we're going to see hundreds of people become more educated. We're going to continue. We've just expanded our staff between the part-time and full-time people. We have about 9 people working on various projects. And that's a big shift for us. We've been very content over the first 10 years of our evolution to sit in our house and make grants and make investments and show up and be project managers and so forth. It's a big step for us to actually say, you know what, I love your idea, but I'm not sure you can get there. So we're going to do a joint venture, and I'm going to hire the people, and I'm going to coach and mentor them, and I'm going to build this business for you. And when it's profitable, I'm going to turn it back over to you. So that's a big move for us. So we're now building an entire portfolio of companies, all in partnership with the Columbus Speech and Hearing, Down Syndrome, with Groundwork Group, with others, where we're making a firm commitment where we're investing more money than ever, but not just in grant making, but put more money at risk to try to grow these social enterprises that eventually will create value. So it's very exciting for us, but really it's probably going to grow faster than I can possibly keep up with.
I hear you. That's where we're headed. ECDI has for us, we're just finishing up our strategic planning for the next 3 to 5 years. Our goals are to be open in Cincinnati and Dayton very soon. We're open in Columbus, Toledo, and Cleveland. And our goal is, we used to always say we like to, through our business creation, we like to create a job a day. We want to be creating 2 or 3 jobs a day, every day of the year. So that's some of our goals, and we're going to grow our portfolio and just try to help people where they need help with business. We have our first question, Mr. Barbash.
Hi, Mark Barbash with Finance Fund. First of all, I think it's really clear that There's some wonderful opportunities and exciting things going on here in Columbus and in Central Ohio. Tony, in particular, the idea about millennials meeting someone for $5, I think we need another program for the AARP crowd. I, for one, would pay $25 to have dinner with Steve Buscemi. So if you can arrange that, I'm sure I can put a bundle of folks together. But, Tony, I really liked your comment a minute ago about the differential and the challenges you ran into working with existing, aging nonprofits and new folks. I'd be interested from Steve and Greg, similar lessons learned as you've done what you've done. What mistakes have you made that you've learned something about how to do this in the right way that we can all learn from as we take a look at this as an opportunity?
Want me to go first?
Go for it.
I think that what we've learned is that we have to remain focused and stay focused on our mission. But just like I mentioned earlier, when things are going well, and thank goodness they are, there's a lot of opportunities. And Ina and I can figure out many different ways to make things fit into our mission. But the best thing that we can do for the organization and for our future growth is to stay really laser focused on what we do and what we've become really good at. So that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, I would just add to that, just to be patient, to be able to know when you've made a mistake and be able to change and fix the mistake. And it's not the fact that we make mistakes, but it's how we react to the mistake and how we recover from the mistake. And so we've learned that time after time in asking all the tough questions, not only to ourselves, but our field partners, the end users, to other nonprofits, and saying, are we on the right track? Are we doing the right thing? And we get criticism from some, and we get praise from many others, and we have to weigh that and take that to heart and just make good decisions.
Thank you for that question,
Yeah.
Mark. Alan, here comes the tough one.
Here's always the tough question. Mr. Proctor.
This is a softball. First, I want to congratulate all of you for being involved in social enterprise and, frankly, doing this forum to bring it to more people's awareness, because I think it's a concept that very few people understand. I'd like to come back to the issue that you raised, Tony, about the old dogs, because I think one of the realities that all of us who work with a nonprofit worry about is sustainability. And many people like myself believe that social enterprise is the primary key to sustainability, because donor fatigue's already there. The question I have is, we know the old phrase that culture trumps strategy every time. But in the tech space, we have tremendous programs to support people who have an idea, to tell them how to move it along. We have networks where they can feed in even when they're at a beginning stage. What do you see as a way to use your term, scale, to really scale the presence and interest in social enterprise among the nonprofits locally? Because if we can do it locally, then we can do it someplace else. But it's that issue of scale, because if we just do one or two, we're not going to make our nonprofit sector sustainable. So I'd view your thoughts on how we develop the pipeline, in other words.
I know you hate that word, right? That our problem is the lack of pipeline. My view is we have to build models based on success. And again, we have made many investments into nonprofit organizations on tremendous ideas, and they never came to fruition because, again, either lack of focus or something else came along, or an economic crisis, or there's always some reason. People respect and chase after other success, and so part of our new model in the last couple of years of bringing these projects in-house is to build a model of success. The best thing we can do is lift up nonprofits in Columbus, Ohio, and say, look how we move the needle by tens of millions of dollars. Look at this new application that was developed with Columbus Speech and Hearing that are now serving tens of thousands of children with autism and Downs. And so it's not the simple answer, because it'd be nice if we could just lift everybody up together at the same pace. But I think if we could build some models and have them well documented, and we can have a lot of success, Other nonprofits will say, well, how do we do that? How do we educate our boards? How do we get our people organized around thinking like that? What was the innovation model that you guys used? And again, we're doing this in collaboration with a nonprofit, but we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But we need to have more successes that both foundations recognize as very viable investments, not just grant making, but investments. But also nonprofit leaders have to point to their peers and try to understand how do they become more sustainable with that business model than what we've traditionally done in the past. So.
Hi, I'm Sarah with School Choice Ohio, and this is absolutely fantastic. It's great to hear about all the work that you're doing, and I've appreciated meeting some of you at the APT conference and the great work that Ohio State is doing in this realm too. So my question is around, I think mostly for you, Steve. What can we do for those of us who are here who do not have a social enterprise or who do not have foundations? Are there ways for us to contribute in this space or to donate in this space, maybe related to Invest Local Ohio? Perfect. And then what does that look like? So if someone here were to donate or to invest through Invest Local Ohio, what does that look like in terms of the impact or the types of people that you're supporting?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because had you not asked that question, I would have been ridiculed and punished for not mentioning Invest Local Ohio. So Invest Local Ohio is a perfect mechanism for that. And Invest Local Ohio is an investment fund that we created. It's one of our 35 or 36 loan funds that we utilize to leverage to loan to small businesses throughout Central Ohio and Ohio. Invest Local Ohio required a securities filing, and that enabled us to create an investment note so individuals in the state of Ohio can invest in our loan fund. It's a minimum of $1,000. And it's for 3 or 5 years, and you get a 2 or 3% return respectively. And it's just a great way to be able to see that money leveraged with other loan funds, 3 to 1 normally, at least 2 to 1, and all the money will revolve, and you'll get your small return on your investment, better than some other tools, financial tools, but we don't need to talk about that because I'm not licensed to do so. But I will tell you that, there's some people in this room that have invested. Aaron Pickhock's in the room. Sorry to point you out, buddy, but he was an initial investor, and that was very, very kind of him, and he was a leader in his community. And people really like seeing the businesses that we invest in, and so that's the easiest way. Thanks.
Hi, Jenny Barney with the Collective Genius. My question comes as a community volunteer who's either on a board member of local foundations or a supporter of them, like small community foundations, church foundations, Rotary Club foundations, school foundations. How do you move them into looking at this social entrepreneur model? I mean, you talked about nonprofits being stuck in bureaucracy and old traditions. So how do you move small foundations into that arena?
Is that a question for me?
And whoever would like to answer.
Well, I'll speak from a foundation side. We just recently, in the last couple of years, joined an organization called Mission Investors Exchange, which Doug Kreidler was one of the original founding board members, but it's a national organization of foundations who are becoming very active in this space. And they have evolved their boards, their foundations, from beyond just grant making to what can we do with the other 95%? And that's the big challenge today for the philanthropic world. If you think about it, we're required to give away 5%, but we'll keep the other 95% sitting in the stock market or in treasuries, in nice, safe incomes, and so we might be making more than 5% or less than 5%, but we're only required to give away 5%. Our view is, why aren't we investing all the 95% or all the 100% into social enterprise? If a foundation's mission is really about social impact, then why are we using 5% of the money? And so I think it really comes down to getting involved and surrounding yourself with other foundations who've been doing this for a long period of time. And there's foundations who've been doing it much, much longer than we have. And I go to those conferences because I learn from them. But it's an opportunity to change the mindset of the board. There's a young man here in town, Mike Schott, of the Schott Foundation. Many of you who are older will remember Marge Schott from the Cincinnati Reds. Well, he's now been brought up to the board level. He's in his 20s and everybody else is in their 70s. He believes in social enterprise. He is trying to change the dynamic of that family foundation and the way they think about investing that money. And so I suggested the same thing for him, is become more educated, go to your meeting, give people food for thought. It's not going to change overnight, but continue to educate them, bring them to luncheons like this, give them the opportunity to surround them with other people who can provide additional insight. So, but the world is changing.
And I would say on more of a community level for ECDI, and we need to do a better job, and we're trying to get involved with more religious and church organizations, but if we can partner with those organizations, help members of the congregation with their, with our grant programs or even with business lending, then they see firsthand the impact that a social enterprise can have on the lives of their own members, and that tends to move people too, as opposed, I mean, it's great to go to the meetings and to the conferences and change the mindset at the board level, but the people that belong to those congregations need to understand as well, because ultimately, it's their money that supports the church, and so that's what I would suggest. And that's up to us as well to create those partnerships.
Yeah, that's a great thought.
Mrs. Kinney?
Well, thank you for my Invest Local Ohio pitch, because that's what I was here for. I do have a question. It's related to how do we get corporations involved in the social enterprise missions and to help nonprofit sector to come up with ideas and innovative approaches? There's a lot of people here in the room, right?
I think I can chime in here for a minute. Really, it has to be a win-win for the industry. And so we've had several industry partners partner with us in our efforts, and it has to do with what is their objective, what is their mission? Do they have a foundation to the organization? And if not, why would they be interested in investing in your nonprofit? Does it promote their PR, or does it help with attraction and retention of employees? Maybe it's an investment, maybe it's a venture capital type of operation. Maybe it's wanting to enter a different market. In my case, it's an emerging market, but in a different case, it might be a different, segment of the population. It's taken, in some cases, like a year or two or longer to cultivate these relationships to get them to the point where we've seen this, but it's always looking for that point of contact who has that angle to be able to get to the right person and be able to pitch the idea and have the exploratory meeting and go from there. At least in my experience, that's worked out really well, especially if you can pull at their heartstrings somehow with your nonprofit.
Yeah, I think it's maybe resetting our own expectations of what we think corporations should do for us. The amount of money that they're giving away in philanthropic dollars has continued to go down a little bit. If you look at the Giving USA report, it's gone from 7 to 6 to 5. But if you look at what's going on in the macro area, as Greg just described, you see more and more organizations, more and more corporations who are saying, how do we take our internal resources and to create value? And so there's a great article by Michael Porter called Shared Value Model. It's an HBR article, and it talks about how these different corporations are using their engineering resources to create good. And instead of shifting into philanthropic dollars, they're also shifting into marketing dollars. So how many of you knew that last year that cause marketing, the idea of your Campbell's soup can with a pink ribbon on it, is a $1.7 billion industry? Corporations are trying to find ways to create value for nonprofits, but we have to reset our expectations of nonprofits in the way that which they want to do that and come up with more creative services that also create value for them, whether it be marketing, awareness, a co-branding opportunity. So that would be my advice.
Thanks, gentlemen. This is terrific. First of all, to know that you're in the community, giving this kind of service, and also helping to educate the crowd. I learned a lot today. Wonderful concepts. I love the phrase humanitarian engineering. Once again, thanks to the Columbus Foundation, Lisa, Doug, thank you all. And let's thank our speakers, Greg Bixler, Tony Wells, and Steve Fireman. Thank you. Enjoy the afternoon.